Thank you for joining us today on Earthfile. Welcome to the program. I'm Ayola Kasim. The Sahel is dogged by poverty, rapid population growth, high unemployment rate, food shortages, and insecurity. In 2005, former President Olusegun Obasanjo envisioned the Great Green Wall, which is a pan-African initiative to restore and sustainably manage land in the Sahel-Saharan region in order to address both poverty and land degradation. In more recent years, the vision has evolved into an integrated ecosystem management approach, but problems still exist. Today, we start with a look at life in some parts of the region. Do stay with us.
My name is Sayore Dramane. I left home because of insecurity. Terrorists came into our village and started killing people. That's why we came here to Konguzi.
Sayore is a farmer who abandoned his crops to save his family. With his wife and 4 children, he sought safety elsewhere in Burkina Faso. At home, he saw farming getting harder as the arid Sahel region got even drier.
It's because of lack of rain and desertification, because people cut down the trees, and this is heating up the climate.
Burkina Faso is one of the world's poorest countries with a fast-growing crisis. Ongoing conflict has forced more than 1 million people to flee their homes. Many come from drought-hit areas where armed groups exploit tensions.
Le changement climatique représente un facteur aggravant.
Climate change has become a threat multiplier. In this context, unsurprisingly, we are seeing conflict over farmland, conflict over grazing land and access to water, as well as its impact on conflict between communities and security issues.
Leur manifestation dans les conflits intercommunautaires ou alors sécuritaires.
The effect of climate change followed Sayore here. His shelter washed away in floods last year that damaged and destroyed the homes of more than 1,700 displaced families in the region. In Burkina Faso, the displaced struggle to find a refuge from violence and the effect of climate change. After leaving their homes, where drought has become endemic, thousands of people then faced violent floods that wiped away their shelters. In turbulent Sahel region, Burkina Faso is at the epicenter of one of the world's fastest growing displacement and protection crises. 1 out of every 20 people, amounting to more than 1 million people, is now internally displaced. Burkina Faso also hosts 20,000 Malian refugees, the majority of whom fled violence in 2012. Across the Sahel, refugees, internally displaced people, and their hosts are subjected to brutal violence, including rape and execution. The COVID-19 pandemic added a new layer of hardship for the refugees and further complicated efforts to support them. The United Nations is again warning that attacks by armed groups in the Sahel will lead to further displacement in a region already hosting nearly 2 million internally displaced persons and hundreds of thousands of refugees. The Sahel, which includes Niger, Mali, and Mauritania, among other countries, is one of the regions most impacted by climate change in the world. This has been caused by decreased rainfall and a depletion of soil due to agricultural overexploitation and progressive deforestation of the original savannas as a result of cutting firewood, bushfires, and stray animals. The United Nations and partners are working on sustainable solutions and strengthening support for both host and displaced populations. Sayore hopes to return home one day, but both here and there, he faces uncertain skies.
Imaginez des personnes qui ont fui leur localité
Imagine these people who have had to abandon everything, all their belongings, to flee insecurity and find themselves in a situation of total despair here. And then they have to bear the brunt of a situation linked to global warming. It's a double dose of human suffering, difficult to bear.
Double souffrance humaine, difficile à vivre.
Very nice to see you on screen. And we're
At the 2021 One Planet Summit held in January in Paris, development banks and states pledged a total of $14.32 billion over the next 4 years to build a Great Green Wall to help contain desertification in Africa's northern Sahel region. The aim of the Great Green Wall is to halt desertification by growing the largest living structure on Earth. The planting of a strip of trees and other vegetation stretching from Senegal to Djibouti is intended to trap the sands of the Sahara and protect surrounding land, something that environmental experts say would restore 100 million hectares of land, provide food security, create jobs, and offer young people an alternative to migration.
I'm very pleased to announce that between now and 2025, the World Bank Group will invest more than $5 billion to improve livelihoods and restore degradation in the Sahel, Lake Chad, and Horn of Africa regions. This investment comes at a crucial time. It will help improve livelihoods as countries recover from COVID-19, while also dealing with the impact of both biodiversity loss and climate change on people and economies.
Speaking at the summit, French President Emmanuel Macron announced that pledges had exceeded the initial target of $10 billion.
We are accelerating and giving a boost, if I may say, to this Great Green Wall, which will extend into the objective we have in the frame of the stimulus plan of a small green wall, meaning we will continue to develop this French part of this agroecological project with projects we will accelerate and finance with the Minister and State Secretary here.
Avec des projets que nous allons accélérer et financer avec la ministre et la secrétaire d'État ici présente.
With development banks and states pledging over $14 billion over the next 4 years to protect Africa's biodiversity. For some, the acceleration seems long overdue. Since the birth of the Great Green Wall initiative in 2007, progress has been arguably slow, with only 4% completed. Speaking at the same event, the chairperson of the African Union Commission urged for more to be done.
100 millions d'hectares de terre devraient être aménagés.
100 million hectares of land will be completed by 2030. The lives of 100 million people will be transformed thanks to farming and other projects. If at the beginning, bilateral and multilateral partners showed encouraging enthusiasm in the will to go along with the project, 14 years later, the launch of this initiative, the dream has faded slightly. Only 4 million hectares of land have been converted out of the 100 million planned. Announced investment is well below the commitments taken, and those which were successful were done in a kind of cacophony. The financing secured so far in the frame of the Paris Agreement on Climate in 2015 is very far from the $4 billion promised then.
Se sont caractérisés malheureusement par une certaine cacophonie. Les financements obtenus à ce jour dans le cadre de l'accord de Paris sur le climat en 2015 sont très loin des 4 milliards de dollars promis à cette époque.
The extra boost could push the initiative further towards its goal of restoring 100 million hectares of degraded land and creating 10 million green jobs by 2030. Once completed, the Great Green Wall will be the largest living structure on the planet, 3 times the size of the Great Barrier Reef.
With growing interest in natural capital as an investment theme, the financial sector has come to see that natural capital can play a decisive role in addressing climate change, as well as supporting the Sustainable Development Goals. Ces laboratoires vivants montreront comment restaurer le capital naturel.
These living laboratories will show how to restore the natural capital in a way to catalyze sustainable local economies. I really hope we will be able to start putting these living laboratories into place to support the initiative of the Great Green Wall.
Pour soutenir l'initiative de la Grande Muraille Verte. As we look towards the United Nations Biodiversity Conference, COP15, in Kunming, China later this year, the Great Green Wall has the potential to serve as an example of large-scale natural capital investment in critical areas such as wider Africa, the Amazon, small island states, and the Great Barrier Reef.
The program aims to regreen an 8,000 kilometers long stretch from Atlantic coast to the Red Sea. It will cross 10 countries as diverse as Djibouti and Eritrea in the east, or runs from Nigeria through Senegal and Mauritania to the west.
So when you hear that so many people have been affected by drought, by desertification, by famine, or by disease, as long as they are far from you, you see these as numbers. When you take it back home, or when it hits you at home, it is a different story. So it was a moment where my family, my village, my country, my nations were actually deeply affected, and they never recovered what they lost. Some people lost confidence, some people lost their lives, some people lost their economy, some people lost their livelihoods, some had to migrate and never came back, and their children and grandchildren are now living abroad. So what has been destroyed by land degradation, by drought, since 1972 was never recovered. Some countries have been so much affected by land degradation that they experience famine, like it was the case in Ethiopia, but was the case also in some parts of the Sahel, like in Niger and Burkina Faso and so forth. Now, people have built their resilience. They know how to cope now with these extreme events. Farmers have also adapted their agricultural techniques, and to some extent, pastoralists have also adapted to the conditions in the sense that they migrate, they go for transhumance, for longer transhumances than before. But at the same time, we see that it is possible to restore land. A country like Niger has millions of hectares that have been brought back to life and are now productive lands where they were barren land in the past. But more importantly, we see that situation in Ethiopia, where some of the most affected communities have now restored their land. The water table has gone up, and they are producing once again in a land that was completely degraded. So it is possible to do that.
In Nigeria, desertification is one of the major environmental challenges threatening the livelihoods of over 40 million people. The most affected states are Adamawa, Bauchi, Borno, Gombe, Jigawa, Kano, Katsina, Kebbi, Sokoto, Yobe, and Zamfara. These states, covering 35% of the Nigerian territory, account for more than 40 million inhabitants and are most at risk from recurring droughts, land degradation, and desertification.
Well, the best way to fight desertification is planting trees. One of the problems we're having really is that of land use change. Because of the growing population, there is a lot of pressure on land. In Sokoto State, we have about 26 gazetted forest reserve areas, covering a total area of over 6,000 kilometers. But most of these forest reserves now have been intruded upon. Some of them have even disappeared because of urbanization and because of farming activity. So it's one of the biggest threats we're having. You know, gazetted forest reserves are protected areas. So in a way, we can manage the biodiversity in those areas, because there are laws that protect them from the kind of activities that are going on. But outside of the forest reserves, there is virtually no control. And most of our shelter belts lie outside of the forest reserve areas, in farmland and what have you, because shelter belts are required to protect farmland, to protect the soil, so that the productivity can be maintained. So there are threats all over.
Implementation of the Great Green Wall commenced in 2013 in the country. The program involves, among others, establishment of Green Wall, or shelter bed from Kebbi State in northwest to Borno State in northeast, a distance of 1,500 kilometers and 15 kilometers across. Development of grazing resources, promotion of alternative and sustainable sources of energy, and promotion of alternative means of livelihoods. It also involved creation of enabling environment for the development of agro-based industries. In Nigeria, the economies and livelihoods of communities living in dry regions depend largely on soil, water and vegetation cover. As these are increasingly threatened by desertification and recurrent droughts, the socio-economic development of the country's dry region is jeopardized. Experts say the Great Green Wall will prevent or reverse the degradation of ecosystems while improving the living conditions of affected communities by enhancing the provision of ecosystem services. One of the key components of the Nigerian Great Green Wall program is the establishment of a 1,359 kilometers contiguous shelter belt from Kebbi State in northwest to Borno State in the northeast, serving as a windbreak. 22,500 square kilometers of degraded land in the dry region of the country will be rehabilitated for agricultural production, and the livelihoods of over 25 million people will be improved by the year 2030.
Those areas designated are fenced off, not in terms of blocks or whatever, but at least as secured to say this has been designated for this. That will allow for regeneration because it's already gazetted, so it can no longer be business as usual. Then the regeneration and some backup of research activities and repopulation of those biodiversity who add to what we have. Just as I mentioned earlier, if those 10 plus those land that the state governors are ceding to us are conserved and gazetted and everybody realizes there is no go area, Nigeria is blessed. Give that location 5-10 years and somebody tells you that this place was degraded, you will not believe because a natural regeneration will occur. Then that natural regeneration cannot be repopulated. You can do interplanting of them, of whatever you think is necessary or needed to be in those environments, or you can create arboretum there of some species that you think are going to extinction, which when anybody gets there in 20-30 years' time, we never knew that there was some artificial interplanting within it. But the advantage of having those additional locations is that it will allow regeneration and to improve upon the management of those areas. And some that had been or almost going to extinction could resurface. But there will be need for commensurate funding for us to be able to achieve what the intentions are all about.
As part of its commitment to contribute to the African Union's Great Green Wall of the Sahara and Sahel Region Initiative, Nigeria in 2015, through an act of parliament, set up the National Agency for the Great Green Wall. Forest experts have said there is a general vicious linkage between desertification and poverty. In general, degradation of natural resources reduces the productivity of the poor, who mostly rely on them, and make them even more susceptible to extreme environmental events. Poverty, in turn, makes recovery from these events very difficult and contributes to lowering social and ecological resistance. To break this vicious cycle, experts say the empowerment of the people who are directly involved is very critical. In this regard, for the sustainable management and the promotion of equity in access to and use of natural resources in the desertification-prone areas of Nigeria, it is imperative to adopt a community-based approach.
It was discovered that Nigeria has reclaimed more degraded land than any of the other 11 countries. So Nigeria is right up there, just like any other country. What are we going to do to make sure that Nigeria stay on top? Of course, collaboration that we're having with all the agencies within our own ministry and outside the ministry. It's one of the flagship projects when it comes to planting trees. Of course, the coordinating body of that is FRIN, that is the Forestry Research Institute of Nigeria, which works with GGW, Forestry Department, and the Drought and Desertification Department. So these are things that we have done and we will continue. Also the GGW, in order to make sure we still excel, we provide some additional livelihood to the people of that area, an incentive to make sure that they maintain any trees that are being planted. We make them to own this project, to be part and parcel of the project. We employ them in raising some of the seedlings, in maintaining the seedlings, and of course, like I've mentioned earlier, providing substitute for forestry for the forest that they are cutting. The woodlots that we provide, stove that we provide, and so many other things. So we are really keeping the pressure on making sure that we not only work along with the other countries, but also excel.
In implementing its Great Green Wall initiative, Nigeria also hopes to tackle the security issue of farmers-herders clashes, a menace which has cost the country so many lives and left it at the brink of total breakdown of law and order, which is a consequence of the southward movement of herders due to the degradation of the ecosystem in Nigeria's Great Green Wall corridor. Nigeria's Great Green Wall experience also entails the rehabilitation of the internally displaced persons, while degraded lands which had hitherto served as their sources of livelihood are reclaimed. Funding remains a main issue, as it is always very difficult for the Nigerian government to appropriate and release funds for issues that concern the environment. The government commits 15% of the ecological fund to the Great Green Wall initiative. Experts say efforts must now be made to ensure that this slice of funding is completely committed to the Great Green Wall initiative, in addition to other external funding.
Forestry Research Institute has raised about 13.5 million tree seedlings. The National Agency for Great Green Wall has raised about 7 million trees. Equally, 3 million seedlings have been raised by the National Nigeria Conservation Foundation, which is one of the main NGOs that we are working on, among others. And also the Department of Forestry has raised about 1 million. So if you put that together, you will find that we have raised about close to the 25 million that we are talking about, maybe a little short. But again, it's something that I said we intend to catch up this year. Now that I can say we have learned the ropes with the pandemic in the 2020, now we'll find ways to go around and do it still without necessarily breaking the protocols of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The Great Green Wall project has helped to shed a spotlight on the recent innovations and sustainable land management in the Sahel region, and at the same time has leveraged a high degree of political will and leadership from member states. In response, public finance for sustainable land management actions has increased, and several donors have also mobilized substantial investments, offering opportunities for rapid progress. The Great Green Wall initiative has revived interest in sustainable land management in the Sahel and north of the Sahara, and has galvanized action to implement the United Nations Convention to combat desertification. However, degradation in the region is often the outcome of past policy and investment failures, and there are concerns in some quarters that current strategies may not depart significantly enough from past mistakes. And with that, we end today's Earthfile. Thank you for watching. Do send us your thoughts. Earthfile@channelstv.com is our inbox. From all of us here in Lagos, it's bye for now.